I think, workforce is one of those issues that I think we're all familiar with. We all talk about. It's not specific to the forest product sector, but it's certainly an area that has been a huge challenge as of late for a number of reasons, both the wax and wane of the industry, but also labor constraints and demographic issues, which I'll talk about in a second. So as far as our team's work, what we wanted to do was really prepare and provide a set of knowledge and understanding that would help inform and develop a comprehensive workforce strategy that supports the goals of the 4 Maine in the state and all the regional and local economies that the industry helps support. As part of the analysis in our team's work, we focus really on 4 buckets, and I guess really 5 objectives, but 4 buckets that help provide that understanding. And the first one is focused on labor demand. So when we look at the industry over the next 5 to 15 years, what do we expect in terms of labor turnover and the number of workers we're going to need to meet those goals? What are the skills that are going to be needed, and what is the characteristics of that workforce look like? The second bucket is really then looking at where those workers going to come from. Where are we going to focus? Where are the pockets of supply? Both the existing pipelines, what do they look like? And what about some other pipelines that perhaps have not gotten as much attention in the past, but are ripe for focus going forward? The third piece is focused on recruitment and attraction. So how do firms and how does the industry get people into jobs? How are the youth perceiving? How are those opportunities being perceived to work in the forest product sector, and where are the gaps? The fourth piece is looking at understanding and assessing sort of the capacity within the workforce training system, broadly speaking. What is that capacity for the system to deliver on the workforce needs in the state? How can those be adapted? Where are the areas of focus? And we've kind of taken all this information with feedback from the subcommittee, workforce subcommittee, come up with a set of what we might call kind of broad recommendation areas for where the industry has told us through the stakeholder interviews that we've done, and also the data collection and the work that the team's done in that area, and then also looking at past reports in the general context of the workforce and demographic state in Maine. And so providing a set of recommendations to help influence those areas where we feel that the initiative could plug into and help try to move the needle. So all this, again, is based on data work, past reports, and stakeholder interviews that we've done to date. And I just want to also put out there, I know this might not be the easiest form to provide feedback, but I would highly encourage, and we welcome and we want to solicit feedback, comments, suggestions, questions, whatever it might be from you. We recognize that while we might have know how to work the data and draw understandings from it, the industry, you guys are the experts on the industry. You know what you need. You know where the challenges really are and how this stuff applies. So absolutely welcome any comments or suggestions you have, and feel free to reach out to me or other members of the team or the subcommittee for that matter. So quickly, just to touch on, we've defined out the forest product sector is multifaceted. But for the purposes of this analysis, we're kind of focused in on a few of the key subsectors, which have to do with harvesting and logging, which also includes some transportation in there, the wood product manufacturing, which is sort of a broad collection, including the sawmills and other processors and end product producers, and then the pulp and paper manufacturing subsector, which is obviously a fairly well defined. There's also recognizing that there are other smaller, firms might fall into one or more of these different subsectors. But again, just for being able to define the analysis and be able to talk about the findings and so on and so forth, that's how we're looking at defining the sector. Okay, so we're going to walk through these 4 buckets and just share with you the sort of the key findings. All of this is summarized in a core report that we're getting ready to wrap up, or we are wrapping up, which will sort of just gets at these issues. But then we've also got an extensive set of which might call technical appendices that provide a lot of the background data work that the team has done. That could be used for both resources and also in the implementation phase going forward for folks to draw upon. So we all know that the Maine is the oldest state in the nation. We've talked about this. We've all heard this repeatedly. I'm one that's harped on this a lot, for better or for worse. But we know that the aging workforce is causing a wave of retirements across a number of different industries, and ultimately it's going to force replacement demands of the workforce, drive replacement demands of the workforce. So if we look across the 3 core subsectors, I've also included transportation more generally in this. So we've got harvesting, pulp and paper, and wood product. A lot of the data that we look at, the government economic data, labor market data, the transportation falls within harvesting. There's some transportation jobs that fall into pulp and paper manufacturing. About 40% of transportation, heavy truck driving jobs fall within the industry, but there's about 60% of employment in that sector that is that falls within its own subsector of transportation, which is sort of a catch-all for everything from, Walmart, department store, truck driving, warehousing, in addition to the forest product sector. So we do want to look at that, given that it's a critical supply chain industry to the sector. But what we can see is that the industry itself is old age heavy. So by 2035, well over a third of the workers will have reached retirement age. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to retire. We all know that a lot of folks in the industry are working well into those later years, but that's a huge chunk. And when we look at the entrants coming in the younger age cohorts, there's some cautionary and warning signs in a couple of these subsectors that we want to pay attention to. So right now in the forest product sector, we estimate there's upwards of 800 workers that are 65, are already in retirement age. That's most acute in the harvesting and logging subsector, where anywhere from 9 to 10% are already in retirement age. That's where the most acute likelihood, or excuse me, the most acute need for replacements we're probably going to want to focus on. But when we start to look 5 to 10 years out, or excuse me, 5 to 15 years out, and we start to look at some of those age cohorts of 55 to 64, we see harvesting. There's still a big chunk of older age workers in that category, but the focus really shifts to pulp and paper manufacturing, where you've got 37% of the workforce is aged 55 to 64, will be entering retirement within the next entering retirement age within the next 15 years. We also know that in the harvesting, people tend to work into the retirement years, showing that, we can see from the data that, again, 9 to 10% are 65 and older. That's less the case in pulp and paper manufacturing, where people tend to retire more quickly once they hit that age. So it kind of gives a prioritization of where we want to focus. Also, when we look at transportation, we also see a big chunk of the labor force is already in retirement, and we do see the age old heavy in that subsector as well. Wood product manufacturing is a bit more balanced. This is not an issue that's specific to necessarily specific to the forest products. We are about a little older than the overall workforce in the state, but definitely older than in some of the other production-oriented industries like precision manufacturing, construction, where we tend to have an older age workforce. So these data, the age demographics and also some economic models that we're looking at form the basis for our labor force replacement projections. So just one point, when we look at, what's the labor demand to support the Maine's goals of $4 billion in growth over the next several years, what we're assuming is that the current workforce and the current state of the industry is going to be held constant. And the vast majority of growth we expect to come from emerging technologies, new technologies coming into the state. Now, that may wax and wane, that we might see more increased growth, especially increased growth in the core subsectors, especially with some of the big investments that Senator King just mentioned, up in Aroostook. But fundamentally, when we're looking at the replacement projection, it's for the existing workforce, we're kind of holding output employment levels steady. So these may be conservative if those growth numbers increase, if the labor demand increases due to investments. But when we look at the replacement projections for the current state of the economy, we look at them under a couple different scenarios. One is a scenario that assumes very modest labor productivity improvements. So there's no significant jump into worker output. So you get more output per worker. That's on the top part of this table. And overall, what we're looking at is our total over the next 15 years is a range between 4,700 workers and 5,200 workers are going to be in retirement age and likely in need of replacement. So in the short term intermediate horizon, which were defined over roughly a 5-year horizon, we're looking at anywhere from 760 to 850 workers that are going to need to be replaced, that we expect to be exiting the workforce. So this doesn't net out our expected new entrants, but this is just looking at what is demand that we're expecting. We look over a 5 to 15-year horizon, that intermediate, medium-term horizon. We're looking at another 4,000 to 4,500 workers. That's really where the bulk of the retirements are going to come into play. We also look under a scenario where there's modest labor productivity improvements, where we assume that output per worker goes up slightly. It might be the case as new technologies come into play, increased automation, which we absolutely expect, especially beyond 15 years. That output per worker will go up, and therefore labor requirements, labor demands will go down. But even under that modest labor productivity improvement over the next 15 years, we're still looking at a total of anywhere from 4,300 to upwards of 4,800 workers that are going to need to be replaced just to keep current levels of output and production. We've looked at a ton of data, so I'm just going to try to summarize a couple of these things. What do these occupations look like? I think we've grouped these occupations together by whether they're focused in production, what's the share that are front office, business operations, what's the share that are in science, engineering jobs. But what I want to draw attention to is on the right side, the right chart. This is looking at the jobs that are specialized or unique to the subsector, meaning that the share of jobs we're showing here, the dark blue, the navy blue being jobs that are what we define as industry specific or specialized to the industry. That means that those jobs are rarely found in other industries in the state. So what it means is that they're concentrated in those subsectors, such as harvesting, are reliant on workers and producing their own pipeline of workers. So at harvesting, you've got roughly 3/4 of workers of the occupations that are in that sector are unique to harvesting, which means that there's less opportunity for scaling workforce training. It's a bit trickier to transition or transfer from other industries. It's not as wide of a skill sets that are shared. We're in paper manufacturing. That specialized set of occupations is around 10%. And so there's much more opportunity, greater opportunity for cross industry transferability of workers. And also, in terms of workforce training programs, there's greater opportunity for scale because there are commonalities with other industries. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we also look at the top occupations. In terms of the occupations that are most in need, and this comes directly from our interviews with industry, and obviously the heavy truck drivers are a huge priority. I think most folks are aware of that, the issues there, but also within the harvesting side, logging equipment operators, but also some more specialized skill set occupations like boiler operators, and also trades. We heard a lot that a lot of the challenges are finding trades people to come and work at plants and facilities. And of course, that's not unique necessarily to forest products, but it does speak to the larger workforce shortage in the trades, more generally speaking. So in terms of the skill requirements, this is from some work that our colleagues up at Maine had done. Nicole Bernstein had done a couple of years ago. And this just, real quickly highlights, this is all based on a survey, I think over 170 forest products businesses on what are the skills that are most needed. So this is current and directly from industry. What shows up most is that the educational needs score shows the priority ranking for the skills. And we've grouped these skills by sort of soft skills, more technical skills, and knowledge bases. But by and large, soft skills are what's popping, and what industry says has said or expressed is what is some of the skill sets that are most needed. So dealing with change. I mean, I think I've heard that time and again. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges in the sector, given the fluctuations over the last the number of years with closures and economic cycles and things like that. Soft skills are more tacit skills, so they're harder to teach in a classroom. They're skills that are learned more by doing them, by on-the-job training, on-the-job learning, compared to more technical skills, which can be, although those are also learning by doing, a lot more of those skills can also be, there's more of a classroom aspect to it. So what this implies generally is that there is there's an opportunity for greater emphasis on more on-the-job learning opportunities, so things like apprenticeships, internships, and applied learning, which could be done in conjunction with in-classroom learning. We expect that these skill sets to change as automation increases and technology investments are made and technologies emerge. But at least over the next 5 to 15 years, this is sort of where the focus is. So quickly, just to hit on emerging technologies, there's a high degree of uncertainty around which of these technologies are going to land. Indafor is identified, and Steve talked about this in the intro, of a number of different technologies that have been identified that Maine is best positioned. But in our discussion with sort of the experts in this area, is that it's really a crapshoot on, well, not necessarily a crapshoot, but there's a unknown probability of which technologies are going to emerge. And there is so much differentiation across these different technologies in terms of the skill sets and knowledge sets that are required. Well, there are certainly common threads, common knowledge bases. We were told that it's probably best to not try to predict which industries are going to come and therefore the types of jobs are going to show up. We expect that as new firms do come into the state or new technologies emerge, there's probably going to be workforce that is going to be brought to the state, especially around those specialized skill sets, which will be supplemented with local labor and some training opportunities. But as these technologies grow and these subsectors, new subsectors emerge, we expect that there'll be greater opportunity for more local cultivation of a workforce and greater need for more targeted training programs. So although we can't say which specific technologies are going to emerge, we did want to try to put a number on, at least the magnitude of what we're talking about to reach that sort of $4 billion goal. There's obviously a lot of these technologies, there's a high value add, very high output per worker, above and beyond what we've currently got within the sector. But we can also say something, we know that there's going to be wood needed to come from the forest. So harvesting and trucking, we can put an estimate on what that might be. So if we just take a look at the table down at the bottom, in terms of using a high output per worker, high labor productivity for the emerging industries, in total over the next 5 to 15 years, and as some of these ramp up, we expect a need from anywhere between 1,100 and 1,300 jobs. But then on the harvesting side, in order to bring the wood necessary to meet that output, based on the capacity and the resource, we're looking at another 1,500 to 1,700 jobs in the harvesting sector. And there would certainly be opportunities and demands in primary in other processing subsectors, sawmills, pulp and paper, and others, or I should say pulp, and others. But again, those are a bit hard to quantify. So these are conservative estimates of what we might expect on the emerging side, but nonetheless, it gives you a sense of the magnitude. So jumping on to labor supply. So there's a number of different areas of pipeline that we focus on, labor pools to pull into the industry. Secondary school students, post-secondary graduates at community colleges and universities, and then also workers that have been displaced from other industries that have transferable skill sets, other manufacturing industries, things like that. As I'll show in a second, the demographic trends show that youth population is declining rapidly and a projected decline. And so when we look at some of the other industries that are also facing labor shortages, collectively, the production and related industries in the state, not forest product sector, but we've quantified their workforce needs of upwards of 27,000 workers over the same period. So that's 27,000 workers that are going to be needed in other industries. So there's going to be a lot of competition there. Therefore, we're looking, where are the opportunities outside of the state? So we'll take a look at a few of those quickly. And then, there's some other populations to consider, and also some of the things that came out of our work is looking at opportunities to diversify the workforce. That's not the non-traditional forest products workforce, looking at female populations and minority groups and diversity of populations. So the in-state youth pipeline is going to continue to decline across the state unless we see significant in-migration, which could be some modest increases since the pandemic. But We're looking at from today through 2036, over the next 15 years, for people aged 15 to 19, kids aged 15 to 19, we're expecting a 10% decline in those age populations. Also, age 20 to 24, which are more likely to be entrants into the forest product sector, we're looking at upwards of 7 to 9% decline in those populations. Coupled with this emphasis on going to post-secondary educational attainment and lack of promotion of career opportunities in the forest product sector by various mentors and guidance counselors and things like that. This all creates quite a bit of a headwind for attracting youth into the state. Nonetheless, this is a core labor pool that we, of course, want to focus on. We also got the CTE programs, and we've looked at in completions and enrollment and these in the programs, both within Maine, which we've got programs that are more specific to forest products. But if we look outside, we see a big opportunity in other parts of New England, specifically in Massachusetts, where we've got CTE enrollment a couple of years ago was upwards of 17,000. These are places that forest products isn't a huge part of the economy down there, and so the opportunities to work in the forest product sector are probably not promoted. Yet there might be a big opportunity to showcase opportunities, a career opportunity in Maine's woods and Maine's forest product sector. So that we feel like is a good opportunity to target. Another group that that's come up a lot, and some work we've done in other sectors, is around military and civilian transitions. And so there's over 200,000 service members that transition to civilian life every year. A lot of them are looking for a new place to live, focus more on economic opportunity, excuse me, and also lifestyle choices. Maine has some of the highest concentrations of veterans in the country, so great infrastructure and support. There's a lot of local but there's one specific organization locally, Boots to Roots, that's doing exactly this, helping to transition and recruit military transitions to Maine to look at opportunities. There's a national organization, and I'm sure there's others, but Workshops for Warriors is one that's focused specifically on the manufacturing sector and transitioning ex-service members into manufacturing career opportunities. So those are a couple groups to plug into that we might be able to look for opportunities. Some of the stakeholders that we interviewed were explicit that ex-military are excellent candidates for working in the mills due to a lot of commonalities in environments of what they're familiar with, awareness and working in dangerous environments and things like that. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but another pocket is to look at regions around the country that have similar industrial makeup and therefore similar skill sets in the workforce, and specifically looking at industries that might be in decline. So there's in theory there's a displaced workforce. If employment is declining in places, especially significantly, we might expect to see workers that are displaced, perhaps looking for opportunity. That might be one place to focus some attention on. We've highlighted some of those counties across the country, across the three different subsectors. Again, I want to spend a lot of time on this now. I know I'm already bumping up against the window here. Challenges in recruitment and attraction. This is coming directly from industry. So one of the big challenges is finding people that want to work in the industry. A limited connectivity to statewide recruitment efforts. So there's obviously workforce is a big focus. And so there's a feeling that we need to be more plugged into a lot of those efforts, especially with the state economic development strategy. I know there's engagement there, but more intentional efforts to recruit. There's a big challenge with messaging, the industry and the career opportunities, both to the public, but also to schools, communities. Amenities play an important role in workforce attraction, both the abundance of natural amenities in the state. We're all familiar with the quality of life. That's why a lot of us are here, but also the disamenities. So a lot of the rural parts of the state lack those basic services like healthcare, access to healthcare, but also other kinds of amenities, cultural amenities, restaurants, things like that. So looking at engagement with more regional and local economic development initiatives is another opportunity for the industry to kind of plug in. Looking at the workforce training and education system capacity, there seems to be significant capacity along in-person classroom learning, but highly fragmented, both from a network standpoint and connectivity, but also spatially, geographically. The MELOC program, the logging operator training program, has had some pretty good success. That's an opportunity to look to scale with increased recruitment. The other thing, I touched on this, but tacit skills gained by learning by doing are paramount. So a lot of the skills that are necessary are going to be learned on the job and through transfer of knowledge from the existing workforce. So apprenticeships and also internships are opportunities there to bolster the workforce training. So recommendation areas. We've got kind of 6 core buckets I just want to hit on briefly. And again, these are focused on the future growth expansion in the industry that's sort of critically dependent on human capital and people in the workforce. And so, in order to attract workers into the industry, it's really about messaging. So there's a big gap in messaging. There's a big gap in telling the story of both the opportunities. And obviously, we see this with the initiative in the sector more broadly speaking, just the perceptions around forest products. And so the first recommendation area, and there's a number of bullets that we kind of include in this, is looking at coordinated marketing and really a branding campaign that showcases the career opportunities of forest products in Maine, and having a point person or point group that is the advocate for these opportunities, connecting with the network, building that network so that information can flow more smoothly across the network, connecting with other initiatives statewide, and really just raising the awareness of the opportunities that are in the sector. Second area is focusing on greater outreach and education and opportunities, very much tied to the first recommendation. But this is more specific to engagement, more engagement to guidance counselors and providing educational materials for them to be able to promote opportunities and really to understand it, to recognizing that there are great opportunities for people, for kids to work in them. Third piece is cultivating out-of-state workforce pipelines. Again, integrating with statewide attraction and recruitment efforts, but also partnering with perhaps other Maine heritage industries, marine, agriculture, and doing a roadshow, if you will, in New England areas to showcase those opportunities in the forest product sector and also the other industries. The fourth area is really focused on leveraging the existing workforce infrastructure, increasing the coordination and engagement across those fragmented networks, and getting information to flow. So if industry is looking for an opportunity, how did they to recruit internships, looking for apprenticeships and training programs, how do they do that? How does that flow? How do they access that? A fifth piece, just really focused on placemaking and how that's important in building workforce attraction and retention. So this is really getting at the amenities. How can those be bolstered? How can the industry participate more in more community building kind of things and economic development more locally? And we feel that that's a real opportunity for the industry to leverage and to help build a workforce pipeline. And the last piece is really focused on just continuing monitoring in order to make decisions, in order to keep tabs on what's happening. Establish some kind of information system that allows any initiatives or policies to be evaluated and changes to be made. For things that are successful, you want to invest more heavily in. If things aren't working, then cutting them out. Just to close out, not rocket science. A lot of these issues we're all super well aware of, especially those that are in the trenches. But that being said, it's been hard to move the needle, and so really focusing on telling the story, coordinating, collaborating, continuing the work that Maine is doing, but extending that into the workforce development aspects. And also, being aware where do we see things going, not reacting to, sort of the issue of the day, but trying to be more proactive in our recruitment efforts and our engagement. But just to remind folks that, again, this is all going to be summarized in a core report, technical appendices that are forthcoming very soon. And we absolutely welcome any comments or questions, and please feel free to reach out to us directly. So I'll leave it at that.